Hello and welcome to the Cloudy IT Web Accessibility Mini Summit. Thank you for joining us here today. We really appreciate it. Today we've got a lineup of fabulous guests who are going to talk about accessibility and managing those documents on your website. Cloudy IT, for those of you who don't know, is a managed service provider, and we are experts in looking after local government organisations, specifically councils, parish and town councils. Now, I'm really excited to join everyone here today to present a short presentation on web accessibility and how to ensure that your council can become web accessible in the most cost-effective way and simple way. It can be a real difficult time at the moment for councils as they try to transition with all the things that are going on around virtual meetings, council elections, and this is a very difficult topic for a number of councils. But thankfully, Cloudy have a solution, and our experts are here to walk through the solutions we offer and also things that could be used from other providers and how they work. So I'm joined here today by, my colleagues Raf and Ariel. Raf and Ariel, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, great. Very well indeed. Thanks. Well, thanks for joining us on this lovely Friday morning. I think with the bank holiday just around the corner, we're all looking forward to maybe clocking off after a busy week. But obviously today, you're going to be running through some of the great features around the accessibility tool that we have here at Cloudy, and also around managing those documents that you've got historically that need to go on your website, but also need to be compliant moving forward. So, Raf, if you could basically over to you and walk through some of the features, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So let me just get my screen shared here. And we've got a quick presentation for you here. And just let me know when you can see the web accessibility as a set of rules. Now I see it up there. Perfect. So first things first, what is web accessibility, right? It is a set of rules, behaviors, code standards, and design guidelines that are meant to allow people with disabilities to effectively use websites. Now, that's actually an important phrase because there's a difference between effectively and equally, right? I can't give somebody who's fully blind 100% equal experience on a website like Netflix. But what I can do is make sure that they have the ability to access all the same information and perform all the same actions. Now, while most of us tend to think of somebody who's fully blind when we imagine somebody who needs to use the internet differently, there are actually a very wide range of disabilities that can impact how somebody uses the internet. As an example, somebody who has epilepsy or a seizure-related disorder can be seriously harmed or even potentially killed by flashing lights or animations on a website that don't stop. That's why many of you may be familiar with warnings before certain music videos or other animations that let people with epilepsy know that might potentially be dangerous for them. You also have a wide range of people with motor impairments or disabilities who may, for instance, not have the use of their legs, or they may need to use a click stick in their mouth instead of the tab key because they may not have use of their hands. So our tool integrates adjustments and addresses pretty much all of these. And we work with people with disabilities on an ongoing basis to make sure that it's not just a compliance tool, but a tool that helps real people use your website. On to the next bit. That just gives you a little bit more detail about who we work with and why we do this. We are very, very proud to be some of the leading providers of web accessibility services in the UK and abroad. And we provide full compliance with the globally recognized WCAG 2.1 AA standard. Now, the WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's the only internationally recognized set of guidelines for web accessibility that exists. And essentially, it's a 1,000-page guidebook that explains what an accessible website should look like. We, in addition to bringing you up to the required level of compliance, will also back it up and show you with scans every month and a frequent option for additional auditing, where we'll make sure that you maintain your compliance. On top of that, our tool is completely session-based. What many of you may have done in the past is something called manual remediation, where you go into the back end of a website and you change the template for everybody so that everybody experiences an accessible website. One of the issues with that is that because everybody's experiencing the same website, and not everybody who, for example, is colorblind in the same way, no matter what colors you choose, it's not going to be accessible to some people. So we and the people with disabilities with whom we work on an everyday basis believe that the best way to provide the accessibility to the widest range of individuals is to let them customize their own experience. And that's what our tool does. Like I said, our tool is completely session based. So for 95% of the website visitors that come to you, they're not going to see any difference except for a small icon and wherever you choose to put the icon, but usually the bottom left of the web page, that gives them accessibility options. Whereas somebody who may be using a screen reader or other assistive technology will be prompted immediately on entering a website with our tool to turn on accessible modes, and they will be able to access everything. On top of that, as many of you probably know, an accessibility statement is a compliance requirement, and we do provide that along with a scan every 24 hours or every update, whichever comes first. It's what I like to call our shot clock. So every 24 hours or every update, we're going to do a full scan of your website to make sure that the statement of accessibility we gave you is still valid and that you're still accessible. Now, what I'd love to do is go into a live demonstration onto Council. So let me switch the screen share real quick and share screen. I apologize. I'm not quite as quick on this as I could be, but I think it'll still work out okay. And can y'all see cloudicouncil.co.uk now? I believe so. So you'll notice that in the middle left, we have a very, very visible web accessibility icon here. And we actually allow you to choose between several icons for your own convenience. But we found that this icon is the most obvious in telling people that it is an accessibility solution. And you see, as it opens, we have first and foremost the seizure safe profile. The seizure safe profile, number one, turns off any animations and it dulls the colors. It makes it safe for people who may have epilepsy or a seizure related disorder. And it's first on there because, as I mentioned before, seizures and epilepsy related disorders and people who live with them are particularly important to address because it's the only way that your website can physically harm somebody. And so it's extremely important to be able to turn that off immediately. The next we have is the vision impaired profile, and this does literally the exact opposite. It makes everything bigger and brighter for people who may have low vision, slightly blurry vision, or other impairments. On top of that, we have a cognitive disability profile, and this helps people who may have autism or dyslexia and other cognitive disabilities by highlighting and outlining various titles and links just so that it's easier for them to navigate. We have an ADHD friendly profile that I really like. I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little bit high energy, so I do appreciate the focus. And what I'll do a lot of times is hide the images because then that way I can focus exclusively on the content of the web page and just on the lettering. Now, then we have this blind users button. And at this point in the presentation, I usually get a very, very good question, which is, well, Raf, if they're blind, how can they click on that button? And I say, that's a great question, sir. That's a very solid point. So that is a good point. If somebody is blind, they can't click on that button because they can't use a mouse. So we identify any assistive technology that's on a person's computer and active the moment they enter our website. And if somebody is blind and they're using a screen reader or a braille reader, it needs to be active from the moment they turn on their computer because, of course, they're blind the whole time. And so we'll send them a voice note or a braille note saying, hey, you've entered an accessible website. Please hit Alt-1 to turn on accessible mode. And then they will immediately be able to navigate the page. Now, I'll just show you really quickly with a couple of these images here as an example. If I do an inspect on this image, there's no alt text. But if I do Alt-1 and I turn on accessible mode, which you should see come up now, oh, I guess I'm having a little trouble with my keyboard. I apologize. But you'll see that immediately we get alt text. So if I inspect one of these images here, I'm going to have an alternative text with no problem. And we can continue doing that throughout the entire website. We do our best to make sure that these alternative texts make sense for people who can't see. But there is a give and take between how descriptive you really want to be with them, because somebody who's using a screen reader is generally not cognitively impaired at all. So as I mentioned, they're listening to the website be read out to them at about 3 times my normal speaking speed. And so because of that, it would be very, very inaccessible and even a little condescending to add a whole paragraph about an image, particularly on a council website or an e-commerce website where they know that they're on the council website. They know that they want to learn about, whether it's bin collection or public services. So there's no need to give them a whole essay on exactly what's going on in the image, just so that they have the context to know what's going on. The keyboard navigation is also super, super important. So you need to be able to navigate the entire website just using the tab key. And if you can't do that, then it's not accessible. On top of that, any drop downs and forms need to open automatically. And when you have pop-ups, you absolutely must have a note that comes out that reads out to a screen reader, hey, you've entered a pop-up, press escape to close, navigate with tab. If you don't tell somebody who's using a screen reader that they're in a pop-up, they may not actually be able to navigate out of it. And in some cases, they have to shut down their computer just to get out of your website, which is a very, very unpleasant user experience for them. And likely they're not going to come back. Alternatively, on the sort of the other side of that coin, because less than 2% of websites are accessible to people with disabilities today, when you have an accessible website, it sets you apart. And people who have disabilities will intentionally come back to your website and be very loyal to you and appreciative. Many of our clients actually get really, really sweet notes from people with disabilities in their region, in their area, who use their website and really, really appreciate the effort that the council or the organization has gone to cater to their needs, because most people don't. Now, there's also a lot of adjustments that we have for more minor disabilities, if you want to call them that. As an example, we have a readable font here, and as you'll see, it changes all the fonts on the website. It changes the font to the default on the person's computer because we assume that that's readable for them. We also have a text magnifier. We can highlight titles and links individually, which is something that the cognitive disability profile does altogether, as you may have noticed. We can scale the content larger or smaller for anybody who may have a visual impairment and not see so well. One point that I'll also make here is that this is not necessarily just for somebody who has what we term a disability. It may also be for somebody who's aging a little bit and doesn't have quite the eyesight that they used to, but wouldn't consider themselves to have a disability. So it makes it easier for a very wide range of people to navigate your website. We can adjust font sizing specifically, adjust the line height. We can align things to the center, the left, the right. We can do a dark contrast. We can do a light contrast. We can do monochrome or high saturation, high contrast, low saturation. And as I mentioned before, not everybody who's colorblind is colorblind in the same way. So you need to be able to make specific color and text adjustments and background color adjustments. Now, I don't know that this is the best looking website I've ever seen with quite these colors, but you can always reset the settings. Now, one reason that we have this reset settings button available is because we actually use local storage on the browser side, not cookies. So we don't impact GDPR or any data protection statutes. We collect absolutely no personally identifiable information, but we do want to save their settings on their browser so that if somebody with a disability comes into your website once and spends, a few seconds setting up their settings and then comes back to it the next day or the next week or the next month, we'll remember their settings for them so that it's immediately ready to go the way that they need it. And that's a much, much more convenient and comfortable interface for someone to use. Now, I'll also point out that we can set this up in 14 different languages. We're always adding new languages. We do have Arabic and Farsi, Chinese, Russian, Japanese, Italian, French, Hebrew, Spanish, Portuguese, German. And so depending on who lives in your area, you may want to have this as an option for them. A lot of organizations will have, in the US at least, I don't know if you can tell, I am American, although I have a decent British accent. I won't do it now just to not offend anybody. But in the US, a lot of organizations will have a Spanish website and an English website. So we make sure that we're able to cater to that. On top of it, we have our accessibility statement here. And as you can see, it's for Cloudy Council, and we give an address for everybody to let us know about if they have any complaints or they have anything to share with us about the service. But as a council, you're more than welcome to have a separate page on your website for a statement of accessibility where you can give more details and have a more personalized message from your council. One other thing that's really nice that we have is the online dictionary here. So this is not just for people with disabilities. It can also be for people who speak English as a second language. For an e-commerce website, as an example, somebody may be having a Cyber Monday or Black Friday sale, and somebody who's not from, the US or Canada or the UK may not be familiar with that. So they may need to look it up. They may also need to look up a word like ambiguous or anything else. And because of that, this online dictionary will help them figure out what's going on the website and make sure that everybody has an accessible and equal experience. I don't know if you guys can tell from the mouse on my screen. This is something that I do normally. I make my cursor larger, but in this case, you can make your cursor larger and change the color on it. Although again, I prefer it to be blue for my own reasons. You can stop any animations on a website separately from the seizure safe profile. You can use the reading guide. You can mute all of the sounds on a website. You can highlight where the hover is or highlight the focus. And other than that, that's more or less what's going on with the accessibility tool. I think on top of that, we are always working to improve it, and we're always listening for feedback because, as I mentioned earlier, we work with a very wide range of people with disabilities to make sure that this is not just a compliance tool. It's not just meant to be something that protects you from fines or litigation or something like that. It's meant to ensure that absolutely everybody out there, regardless of their ability or their age or their mastery of the English language, can use your website equally. That's more or less it. I think David will go ahead and take back over now, and we'll move things over to the remediation side.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Raf, for that. It was really good to have you there talking about the product in some detail. I think, it's really good there because what we tend to find when creating a web accessible compliant site is that, you can make the site compliant, but then when you add new pages, you have to worry about all those new pages and making them compliant as you go along. Whereas I think with your tool, it just does it as we go along, does it? So, and it updates the state as well.
Every 24 hours or every update, whichever comes first. I know most council websites don't update every hour, but we also work with e-commerce clients. And in those cases, many of them will update several times an hour. So it is very important to have that constant adjustment for them.
Excellent. Well, that sounds great. And also, I suppose the great thing with it is it's so simple to use for people trying to use it, isn't it? They go there, it pops up on their screen, it ensures you are fully compliant all the time, which is great. So, well, thanks very much. Hope we've got a couple of questions at the end, which people might ask, but thanks for running through it with us, and we'll see you a bit later. Cheers. So Ariel, over to you. Obviously, thanks for joining us to talk about obviously the documentation, which we know is also important because as well as having the site being accessible, you need to have the documents which are accessible as well. And this can be an absolute headache because these long agenda packs have lots of other documents, PowerPoint slides, Word documents integrated into them. It can be a bit of a headache trying to make sure that they are compliant when they go on your site. So what can we do for that, please?
Right, definitely. Thanks for that introduction. So a lot of the times people don't understand that when they do make their website accessible, that these files that are usually links on the file on a website also need to be accessible. Also need to be basically accessible for individuals with screen readers or as Rafi mentioned, the motor impaired. And so for that to happen, there are several things that we do. It's either a remediation of a PDF document or a Word document. And really, these are a little less complex than the next ones that I will talk about. And usually from what I understand, most councils would have on their website. We go manually through the document and make it accessible. We add the different tags that need to be there. And that will make it navigable, that will make it readable to the user, whether it is on your website or whether you even sending that specific file through an email to any one of your colleagues. And so that is something that we deal with. We also deal with PowerPoint presentations or Excels. This is usually something that people have on their websites for financial reasons, because they want to have it downloadable in that file type, or because they want to keep it as a PowerPoint. We also deal with that, but we do recommend that you turn any one of your files into a PDF. That would be sort of a best case scenario. Just because anytime you do add different parts to a presentation after it's been remediated, it could sort of change the whole remediation of the file, and you'd have to go through that again. But what we do is go through all of these manually in a very sort of simple, quick manner. We have a big team that does this. And so when it comes to those historical archived files, we've dealt with either 4,000 at a time or 5,000 at a time, that is something that we could definitely handle for you guys. The next sort of, hold on, let me just move to the next slide. The next option really is a sort of an option to go about it as you go. So once you create the file, you then attempt to make it accessible, which really will help in the future, because you won't have 5,000 pages of PDFs to remediate as you go. And here, David, I'd be glad to sort of pass it along to you if you want to sort of talk about this option with regards to Adobe Pro DC Acrobat.
Absolutely, thanks for that, Ariel. So just to confirm, really, essentially, what we can do is, if you do have large documents large numbers of documents that need to be accessible, we can help you with that and get them onto your website or your new website that's accessible, and make those documents accessible. And as Ariel mentioned, moving forward, how do you make your Word documents, your PowerPoint, your Excel, but fundamentally your agenda packs and all supporting documentation accessible? And there are a couple of options here, and I'm sure lots of clerks and officers have come along and found different options. So we're just trying to spread best practice and show those different options available. So what I'm going to do now is, on my screen, I'm just going to share a couple of those different options that you might see. So here I've got a Word document. I'm just going to quickly save that document now. Here we go. So imagine this is a Word document. You have a couple of system features built in. And actually, our last summit that we hosted with Microsoft back in March, we had John from Microsoft talking about accessibility, which you can find on our YouTube channel. If we go here and under Review, you can see here we have an option around accessibility, and you can check the document itself to see if it's accessible. And obviously this one is doing quite well, but clearly there's not much on it. But also around that, you have the ability to leave that feature on, so as you're working on a document, you can ensure that it's always running in the background. I realize that might be quite small to read, so apologies, but essentially it says keep accessibility checker running whilst I work. So that's a really good feature. So this is great, because it will certainly assist you in ensuring that as you create their agenda packs, they're as accessible as possible. But it unfortunately does miss a couple of points and isn't really what we would consider the gold standard. Obviously it's free because it comes with Microsoft, but in terms of actually making them WCAG compliant, then the gold standard is from Acrobat and Adobe. And if I go here, we've got the Adobe plugin here built into it, and we've got create and send and create PDF. If I just quickly write some documentation here, we will have the option to create the PDF and make it accessible as well. So this is really useful in terms of how to do that. Now, what I'm going to do now is actually play a short video where you'll see this in process and a step-by-step guide on how that works. So if you watch the video now, you can see how that's made accessible. Great. Well, I hope that short video was useful in showing you some of the basic key steps to make a PDF accessible compliant. We're happy to run through and show you some examples of how that might work if you do have any questions. And you know, we know that creating a website and the documentation can be difficult, and we're trying to find solutions to make it a lot easier for you, whether you're a small parish town council or a large town council. So we've whizzed through a bit quicker than expected in terms of it all, but it's all quite straightforward in terms of what we're offering, and we know it's obviously quite a complicated problem, but we do think we've got a simple solution here, and I've shown you a couple of examples of it. We've had a couple of questions asked, which is fantastic. So if I could ask Raf and Ariel to join us again. Hi. Thanks, guys, for your presentation. I really appreciate you coming on and going through the various aspects there. We've had a couple of questions come in. So, Ryan, do you want to put the questions on the screen for us, if that's okay? Brilliant. So we've got what compliance levels does your accessibility tool achieve, and will my council be fully compliant? So great question, and really good to answer. Raf, have you got an answer for that, please?
Oh, let me think. No, I do. Yes. So what is required is the WCAG 2.1 AA level of compliance. The WCAG has a bunch of different editions. The 2.1 is the most recent. There's been some talk about the 2.2 coming out soon. Not to worry, we are going to be compliant with that the moment that it comes out. And there are 3 levels. There's A, AA, and AAA. I think of it like the 3 Bears story with the porridge. The AA is the perfect amount of porridge, and that's the level that is required and suggested. So that is what we comply with.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I love the little story you threw in there as well. Fantastic. Ariel, also in terms of the compliance level for the documentation as well, when we work on documents, what level do we get them in terms of compliance, please?
Yeah, so that is actually the exact same level. It's the WCAG 2.1 AA level. It is the worldwide accepted standard currently. And so that is what the documents are compliant as.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that, and a really good question. Ryan, can we have another question, please? Brilliant. So it says here, so thank you, Rose, for tuning in and joining us, and also for your question. Our current website passes accessibility tests when on a laptop, but does very poorly on a mobile phone. Do you have a different program designed for making both computers and mobiles compliant? So really good question. I think in terms of if you look at the stats now, you know, more people probably view websites on their mobile phones than they do on their computers. Raf, you know, how does our app respond to that, please?
It is exactly the same on mobile and regular web. The only real difference is that your icon might appear a little bit smaller on somebody's phone, but you can actually adjust that. One of the nice things with our tool is that depending on the needs of your website, you can ask our team to customize the appearance of the tool for you so that it shows up properly on mobile. And we do have testing available as well. So you should have just as accessible an experience on your phone as you would on your laptop.
Right. Thanks very much for that. Thanks, Rose, for the question. I hope I answered it for you. And if you do need any further explanation, please do get in touch. Great. So any more questions, please, Ryan? Do you have problems with spam and accessibility forms within your website packages? Okay, interesting. Thanks very much, Buckingham Town Council, for that question. So in terms of spam and the forms on our website pages, that can be an issue, and it's not really the accessibility tool that fixes that one. It's more actually the spam filter you have built into your IT system. So here at Cloudy, we're a Microsoft 365 partner and a big champion of the 365 environment. And we tend to find that with the standard package you get from Microsoft, you have an adequate level of spam protection. And we do know that obviously it can be an issue being inundated with all sorts of odd inquiries, etc., off the website. So there's a couple of things to do. Obviously, the email client you use will eliminate some of that spam, but equally you can install additional plugins on your website that will obviously remove that. And you could even have features such as the catchphrase, where it basically asks you to ask a question before you submit the question or fill in the form as well. So thank you very much for the question. I hope I answered it. So in a combination of email, a good email platform, plus the relevant plugins. But if it is a specific issue, please do let us know, and we'll happily look into it for you. So thank you. Is the accessibility tool only available for a website that you build, or can I purchase it with my existing website? So a good question again, and thank you very much for that. So you can actually purchase our tool without hosting it on your website, which is really useful. We can just provide you some code, and then that copies across, and that will ensure you are compliant with your existing website. I think from our perspective, it's all about flexibility. Like as I've mentioned at the beginning of the summit, there's so much going on, so much to think about for clerks, officers, and counsellors. That whilst this is an important matter, accessibility, it's something that maybe you are looking for as a flexible option as possible moving forward. So absolutely, you can use our tool without hosting it with us. We obviously do recommend that you do, but not a problem at all. So thank you very much for the question. Is there any more questions at all, please? Hi, Alison. Thank you very much for the question. Should we put alt text for every image on website? I thought blank alts were acceptable if the image did not add to the content of the page. Brilliant question. Thanks ever so much. Raf, do you have an answer for that, please?
Yeah, it's always better to have alt than not have alt text. Our tool will actually automatically insert alt text where needed. Now, if you have just a decorative image that adds no content to the website, I can understand that you might not want to bother putting alt text there, but as a best practice, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, like a Boy Scout.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Raf. Cheers for that. Brilliant. Any more questions at all, Ryan? Do you think this will become the standard for commerce websites going forward, especially B2C? Thank you, Gil, for your question there, and really interesting point. I mean, obviously, local government, there is a government legislation around this for town and parish councils and local government to apply for this, but we do feel that it shouldn't be just those organisations. Here at Cloudy, we have also done our website and encourage our customers to do that as well. So I think it is a matter of time, and I do know in other countries that people are getting sued for websites that aren't compliant along this. And Ralph, what's your experience of this, please, and what do you think is going to happen?
Oh, well, I don't want to make people too sad, but to give a very brief overview, in the US, it's an absolute requirement to be accessible now. While most businesses are still unaware of it because they've never encountered it in the past, it is absolutely a hard and fast requirement. In Canada as well, in the province of Ontario, now the government of Ontario passed the AODA. It came into effect January 1st of this year. And they actually now have the right to fine any organization that's not accessible and has, I believe, over 50 employees or over 1 million in revenue per year, 100,000 Canadian dollars a day. Now, of course, a Canadian dollar is only about half a pound, so it's not that much money, but you still don't want to be fined that much every single day. I also think that in general, aside from the legal liability and the requirement side of it, it's not only morally right, it's a business imperative. 26% of American adults live with a disability. That number worldwide is around 20%, yet less than 2% of websites are accessible. So when you make your website accessible, you set yourself apart and you create recurring customers. You make really loyal customers out of these people who can now use your website as opposed to everyone else's.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. And anything else you want to add to that at all, Ariel?
I would also mention that making your website accessible adds to your SEO with regards to bounce rate and time spent per page. And so that definitely, in the eyes of Google, makes your website better.
Sounds good. Definitely, that's certainly super important. And I think certainly as we all move online, and obviously we've moved online many years ago, but essentially we are so reliant on information we receive from websites, from apps, that having it accessible for all is important, regardless of if it's legally required or not. So certainly, I think maybe even though it feels like it's kind of thrust on us, certainly the local government sector, we're setting a standard and being trailblazers, hopefully, for the rest of the country. So it's really, really useful. Thanks very much, Gil, for the question. Really appreciate it. And any questions, do get in touch, please do. So do we have any more questions at all? Do we have a way for check my current website meets web accessibility requirements? So thanks very much for that. And we do actually have a way to check your accessibility. I might just share my screen quickly if that's okay. So Ryan, if you can just bring up my screen, I'll just quickly show people how that's possible. So here we go. So if you go to www.cloudyit.co.uk, On our website, we have an accessibility checker where you're able to check your website and receive a full report on areas you could improve your website. So let's wait for it to load here. So it's kind of buried a bit under some of the pages. Just wait for it to load up. Right, finally, there we go. So if I go into here we go. So apologies for the delay there. Here we go. So go to sectors, and there's our accessibility checker here. So we've got it compliant and ready to go. Into sectors, councils, and web design. Seems to be running a bit slow on my computer today, so apologies for that. And we've got
Okay,
our
we blame
accessibility
StreamYard.
checker just a bit further. So and here it is here, your accessibility checker. So if you have got any questions or you are concerned about your website, please go and fill this form in, and that will allow you to check if it is accessible or not. So brilliant. Are there any more questions at all, Ryan? Brilliant. So do you have facilities to translate, convert to Welsh Community Council? Brilliant. Okay, well, thanks ever so much for that. Good question. Raf, can we convert websites to the Welsh language?
So unfortunately, that's not a functionality that we have available now, although it is something that I'm internally pushing for, because every time I drive through Wales, I am absolutely fascinated by the road signs and desperately want to know how to pronounce these words. So I want to learn about it, and I would love for us to be able to do it. So hopefully we'll have it in an update in the future.
Brilliant. Okay, certainly I think very useful and a very good point as well. So something we'll look into. So thank you very much, Dave, for that question, and we'll look into that for you. Brilliant. Well, we've had some really good questions come in, so thanks ever so much. And if are there any more questions, actually, just in case? I'm sure there's a couple more come in. Okay, brilliant. We'll keep going. Does Cloudy offer email hosting with websites, or would we need to have a separate provider for that? So a good question. We provide emails with our packages. They are hosted through Microsoft 365. We are a Microsoft partner, and as now outlines, we provide email packages based upon a centrally managed solution in the cloud, which we promote as Microsoft 365. So absolutely, we can host your emails and website. We do them in different packages, but they're hosted through Cloudy and done in the most robust way. So thanks, Rose, for that question. Any more questions at all? Is support integrated into the cost of the website accessibility tool, and are there any hidden extra costs? So support is included for the tool because it does work incredibly well. So I'm not going to go through our various prices now. We have got discounts available at our website, and we'll show you where to go with those in a moment. But we have a couple of packages available where we offer support and additional security around your IT system. So we offer the accessibility tool as a baseline package, and we've got some discounts for this summit available as well. Cheers. Is the accessibility tool a one-time purchase or is it an ongoing cost? So there is an ongoing cost to the tool because we have to keep it updated. Raf, anything else you can add about the tool and why there is an ongoing cost to it?
Absolutely. So on the one hand, your website may update more frequently or less frequently. And so because of that, there is work that our AI needs to do. On our side, we're also always improving the tool. And so because it's not permanent changes that are being made to your website, our AI is always doing work for you. So there does need to be an ongoing cost. That being said, the comparative cost to not being compliant and not being accessible is dwarfed, I think. As an example, in the US, the cost of just the lowest level of litigation for accessibility is around $30,000, whereas our tool is a tiny fraction of that on an annual basis. So I don't think it's egregious by any means, and it's actually a great opportunity to improve a lot of aspects of your website. One of the things that I believe I touched on in the presentation is that it's not just for people who may consider themselves to have a disability. It's also for people who might be a little bit older, speak English as a second language. So you can see it as a potential increase to revenue and traffic and SEO, as Ariel mentioned as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Raf. I think we've got one more question in, so we'll answer that quickly and wrap things up. So, do we have access to presentation afterwards? So we are sharing this entire session afterwards on YouTube, so it will be available. So absolutely, and we'll also make the presentation available as well. So thanks very much for that question. So we've had some great questions come in, and I hope we've answered all of them as satisfactory as possible. We are doing a lot in this sector, and we've got a lot of exciting things to offer. And if you could share the screen for us, Ryan, that would be great. If you visit our summit offers page, www.cloudyit.co.uk/summit offers, we do have there a list of offers available for attending this event, which is basically 10% off website builds, plus also a discount as well for your hosting them as well. So we've got some great offers there, for not just from this event actually, but from previous summits that we've also run. But certainly, Raf and Ariel, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking time at your busy schedule to talk about this fantastic product and helping allow councils to become accessibly compliant, but also just generally a really solid product. So thanks ever so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
this was really fun.
Cheers, thank you. And finally, we also have a number of other events lined up here at Cloudy. We're really proud to be working so closely in the sector and run a number of events to inform and spread best practice for councils. So in June, we have a Cloud Productivity and Finance Summit, where we'll be talking about cloud productivity, the apps in the cloud, how to use it effectively to run a modern council, and finance as well. We'll be joined by RBS, who will be presenting their solution in the cloud and some of the great new features that are available. And then in October, we also have our Social Responsibility Summit, where we're talking about CSR, and we've got experts come along to talk about how you can measure impact and how you can ensure that your council is meeting its standards around corporate social responsibility, something that's super important, and here at Cloudy we do take really seriously. But thank you so much for joining us. We hope the session today was really useful. It's been a pleasure talking to my colleagues about web accessibility, and if anyone does have any questions, please do get in touch. But thanks ever so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekends, and speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Everybody in the staff team is significantly happier with the system and the support that we have now. So for councillors, for example, over the recent coronavirus lockdown, we've been able to maintain online meetings because all of our councillors have access to Teams via their tablets. So I can sit here in my front room, managing 19 councillors and 4 or 5 officers and members of the public, holding an online meeting with the integrated system that Cloudy provided.
The one thing that I'm really pleased to see is that our actual councillor attendance at the meetings has actually been boosted. We're getting virtually 100% attendance at all the meetings, which I think is a really good thing, and I am in no doubt whatsoever that's by the virtue of the fact that they're able to access the remote meeting via Teams.